Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday, July 22nd. And we find ourselves in the 16th week in Ordinary Time for our liturgical year. Did you know that by the third trimester of a pregnancy, that a baby can recognize the voice of his or her mom? And after the baby is born, the baby can distinguish the voice of mom from any other female voice. I find that to be remarkable, and I marvel at the closeness, the intimate nature of the bond between a mother and her child. In the first reading today, we hear God say this to Jeremiah: "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I dedicated you. A prophet to the nations, I appointed you." We see and we hear the use of the image of the womb to try to convey the intimacy that we share with God. Before anyone else knows us, God knows us. God has formed us. And might we be able to hear God's voice, even in the womb? In another scripture passage, we hear the power and intimacy of knowing and recognizing the voice of those we love. And this passage is from the Gospel of John. Mary of Magdala stayed outside the tomb weeping. And as she wept, she bent over into the tomb and saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they've laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus, but she did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" She thought it was the gardener and said to him, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you laid him, and I will take him." Jesus then said to her, "Mary." She turned and she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. The sound of Jesus' voice reached deep inside Mary Magdalene, and she recognized that it was Jesus. The Jesus who was now risen as he said he would. I share that because today is the feast day of St. Mary Magdalene, and she is a very important person in our church. St. Thomas Aquinas referred to her as the apostle to the apostles. So she has much to teach us about wholeheartedly following Jesus and listening for the sound of Jesus' voice in our lives. It would take a whole other video to explain how the person of Mary Magdalene has really been misrepresented and misunderstood for centuries within the church. Often mistaken for a prostitute or a public sinner, she was, on the contrary, one of the primary witnesses of some of the central events of our Christian faith. She is thought to be a woman of means who supported Jesus and traveled with him as one of the disciples. And she was present for his trial, his torture, the way of the cross, his crucifixion and burial, and then the resurrection. During the time of Jesus, women were considered second-class citizens. So it is all the more remarkable that, given that reality for women, all four Gospels, written over the span of decades, written by different authors in different places, and written for four different audiences, all four have Mary Magdalene present when Jesus appears after he is resurrected. And he commissions her to go tell the others that he indeed has risen. Pope Benedict said this in 2007: Among the disciples, many women were chosen. They played an active role with the context of Jesus' mission, among them the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene, plus others. The women, unlike the 12 apostles, did not abandon Jesus at the hour of his passion. Mary Magdalene was the first witness of the resurrection and announced it to others. Pope John Paul II said this: "As Mary of Magdala followed her Lord, let us follow also. As she did not shrink from the horrors of the cross, let us not shrink from the task of claiming our call to follow the Lord." So what does Mary Magdalene say to us today about our call as disciples? I think that Mary shows us a heart full of courage. Even though women were not highly regarded in society, she was still able to courageously find her place as one of Jesus' disciples. And that courage enabled her to stay with Jesus through the crucifixion. That courage also enabled her to go to the tomb. You know, those who followed Jesus were afraid because they thought just by associating with Jesus that they might be persecuted too, perhaps even killed. But she still went to the tomb anyway to bring spices and then to come back the next day, the day that she encounters Jesus, who has been risen. So Mary teaches us and challenges us to be people of courage. A heart full of love. That's something else she teaches us. It is love that motivated Mary to continue in following Jesus. If her heart was not filled with that love for him and for the message he taught, she would not be able to be the apostle to the apostles, as St. Thomas Aquinas said. Just think about someone that you love so dearly in your life. That love motivates you to be there for them no matter what, to make sacrifices for them when they're needed. Love is at the core of Christ's message, and we see how much Jesus loved others, especially those most alone and abandoned. So Mary teaches us and challenges us to be disciples filled with love. And lastly, she is a model in a particular way for women in the church. There's a long history, unfortunately, of the voice of women, the gifts of women not being fully recognized and utilized within our church. And as a woman myself, who's been a Catholic my whole life and a minister in the church since the age of 22, I look to Mary Magdalene as a source of strength and hope, to remind me to use my gifts and talents on behalf of the mission of Jesus. And Jesus recognized that in her by appearing to her and asking her to go tell the others. That's very powerful to take in. So Mary offers us the message of being courageous, of having a heart brimming over with love for Jesus. And the challenge to use our gifts, our voice, our talents to spread the message of Jesus. So I'd like to close with a quote from Kathleen Housley. "There once was a follower of Jesus who loved him enough to have the courage to watch him be crucified. He, in turn, loved her enough to choose her as the first to know of his resurrection." So I hope that you and your families continue to be safe and well. And until we see each other again, I wish you much peace and much hope.